9-foot alien mother rescues him from the battlefield and cares for him like no one else could. HFY sci-fi story. The battlefield was a wasteland, strewn with the remains of machines and the carcasses of fallen soldiers. Smoke rose from the twisted wrecks of ships, and the cries of the dying echoed across the scorched earth. Sergeant Lucas Grant, bloodied and barely conscious, lay amidst the chaos, his body broken from the brutal battle. The sounds of combat were fading as his vision blurred, but the last thing he remembered was the strange, alien creatures that had descended from the sky, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. His body ached, his limbs refusing to move, but as his consciousness began to slip away, he heard something, a deep, rumbling sound that reverberated through his chest. A figure appeared in his fading vision, enormous and imposing, standing at over 9 feet tall. Its shape was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The creature was humanoid but with a smooth, gleaming exoskeleton, its limbs powerful yet graceful, and its face hidden behind a helmet-like mask. The air around it seemed to shimmer with an ethereal energy, and the being radiated a sense of calm that was almost otherworldly. With a sudden surge of strength, the figure reached down and gently scooped him into its massive arms. Despite the creature's immense size, there was no roughness to the movement, no harshness in its grip. It cradled him like a child, holding him with a tenderness that defied its terrifying appearance. Lucas barely had the strength to protest. His vision flickered, and before he knew it, he was lifted off the ground, soaring through the air as the creature carried him away from the hellish battlefield. The journey was long, but Lucas could not focus on much as unconsciousness claimed him once more. When he awoke, he found himself in a strange, serene place. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flowers, and the ground beneath him was soft yet firm, like a bed of moss. The alien creature had placed him down gently on a bed made from the same strange material. As his senses returned, he noticed the being was still there, watching over him with a protective gaze. But it wasn't just its size that had captivated him. There was a strange aura of maternal care that radiated from it. The alien, despite its fearsome appearance, exuded warmth and kindness, qualities that seemed utterly alien in a galaxy of war and conflict. 4 days, Lucas was cared for. The alien mother, that's what he began to call her in his mind, tended to his wounds with a precision and skill that rivaled any human doctor. Her touch was soothing, her presence calming. She would feed him strange but nourishing foods, always with a gentle insistence that he eat, and she would sit by his side, her massive form a constant, reassuring presence. Slowly, Lucas regained his strength, though it wasn't just his body that was healing. Something deep inside him was changing. The more time he spent with this alien being, the more he realized that she was not like the invaders he had fought against. She was not here to conquer or destroy. She was here to protect, to nurture, and to show him that there was more to life than the endless cycle of war. One evening, as the sun set behind distant alien mountains, Lucas managed to sit up. His wounds had nearly healed, and though his mind still lingered on the horrors of the battlefield, he could now see them through a different lens. He looked at the alien mother, who sat beside him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dimming light. Why did you save me?" Lucas asked, his voice weak but full of curiosity. The alien mother's gaze softened. She didn't speak in words, but Lucas could understand her through some unspoken connection. She was not just a warrior or a force of nature. She was a protector, a nurturer. She had seen his pain, his suffering, and had chosen to step in, to offer him care and compassion. In the silence, Lucas felt a deep sense of gratitude. It was then that he understood, not all alien species were enemies. There were those who fought for survival, those who fought for peace, and those who simply wished to care for others. The galaxy, vast and uncertain, held far more than just conflict. The alien mother stood, towering over him, and offered her hand. Without hesitation, Lucas took it, feeling the strength of her grip, but also the warmth and tenderness that came with it. He had always been a soldier, a fighter, but in that moment, he realized there was more to life than war. There was love, compassion, and the hope that one day, humanity could be as capable of caring for others as this 9-foot alien mother had cared for him. With her help, Lucas would find his way back to his people, but the experience would stay with him forever, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there could be a light, a protector, and a mother's love. As Lucas recovered under the alien mother's care, the days blurred together. He became acutely aware of how different this place was from the war-ravaged world he had left behind. The environment, though alien, seemed to be a sanctuary, a place of calm and beauty untouched by the scars of battle. Vibrant plants with bioluminescent flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and the skies above were painted with colors that seemed almost too perfect to be real. The air had a richness to it, filled with the scent of unknown flora that soothed his senses in a way he had never experienced before. The alien mother, whom Lucas had come to think of as Kaluna in his mind, never left his side. She tended to him with unwavering dedication, her towering form always present, watching over him like a sentinel. As he gained strength, their bond grew. He began to understand that her species, though vastly different in appearance and biology, shared one thing in common with humanity: the capacity for empathy and care. Kaluna would communicate with him in a way that transcended language, through gestures, expressions, and the calming hums that emanated from her chest. She spoke to him of her world, her life, and her desire for peace. But it wasn't just physical recovery that Kaluna offered Lucas. She began to teach him about her people's philosophy, a stark contrast to the endless cycles of war humanity had been locked in for centuries. She spoke of her species' devotion to balance, to the preservation of life, and their deep belief in unity with all living beings. They did not conquer other civilizations, but sought to help, to guide, and to heal. It was a way of life that resonated deeply with Lucas, who had spent much of his life in the military, seeing nothing but destruction and death. One day, after weeks of recovery, Kaluna took him to the edge of the sanctuary where the land met a vast, shimmering lake. The water was unlike anything Lucas had seen before. It seemed to pulse with an inner light, as though the very substance of the lake was alive. The sky above was a soft violet, and the stars were just beginning to appear in the growing dusk. Kaluna sat beside him, her presence massive yet gentle, and pointed to the horizon where a series of ships could be seen descending from the sky. It was a familiar sight, human ships, the same kind that had been used in the war. His heart clenched at the thought of the battlefield again. But before he could speak, Kaluna placed a hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture of comfort, and somehow, it steadied his racing heart. "Do not fear." Kaluna's presence seemed to reassure him. "They are coming to you, not for battle, but for you." Lucas looked at her, confused. "For me?" Kaluna's eyes softened, glowing faintly in the dimming light. "You are not just a soldier, Lucas Grant. You are a messenger. The humans you once fought against, they have lost their way. They have forgotten what it means to protect, to nurture. But you can show them the path. You have seen it, the path of care, the path of peace." Lucas turned his gaze back to the incoming ships. His heart was torn. The war had been brutal, and the memories of his comrades lost in battle haunted him. He had never thought of himself as anything more than a soldier. But now, standing on this alien world, cradled in the warmth of Kaluna's care, he felt the weight of her words. He had seen the destruction of humanity's conflict, but he had also seen the possibility for something different, a future where war did not dictate their lives. With a deep breath, Lucas stood up, the strength in his legs now fully restored. He turned to Kaluna, who looked at him with a mixture of pride and hope. "I don't know if I'm ready to be a messenger," Lucas admitted, his voice still tinged with doubt. "But I can't ignore what I've learned here." Kaluna stood beside him, towering even higher, and placed her hand gently over his heart. "You are ready. You always have been. You just needed to remember what truly matters." The ships landed, and human soldiers disembarked, their armor battered and worn, their faces weary from years of war. As they approached, Lucas stepped forward, his mind swirling with the gravity of the moment. They had come for him. He was their last hope, the one who had survived the battlefield, the one who had been shown the way by the most unlikely of teachers. The soldiers looked at him with a mixture of surprise and recognition. They had heard rumors, whispers of his miraculous survival, and stories of an alien who had cared for him like a mother. Lucas could see the doubt in their eyes, the skepticism of those who had fought without question for so long. But he also saw something else, a flicker of curiosity, of hope. Lucas addressed them, his voice steady but filled with the conviction he had never known before. "We've been fighting for so long, chasing after victories that cost us everything. But there is another way, a way where we don't need to destroy each other. I've seen it, I've been shown it, And it starts with care, with understanding, and with the belief that we can be more than just soldiers. We can be something better. The soldiers remained silent, processing his words, but Kaluna's presence was felt behind him, a silent promise that they were not alone. Take me to your leaders, Lucas continued, feeling the weight of his words settle into the very fabric of his being. Let me show them what I've learned. Together, we can rebuild, not just our world, but our hearts. Kaluna stood by his side, a silent guardian, as the future of humanity hung in the balance. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Lucas Grant felt a sense of purpose that extended beyond the battlefield, a purpose rooted in care, in unity, and in the hope that peace was possible. And as the night sky stretched above them, filled with stars, he knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning. The next few weeks felt like a blur of negotiations, tense conversations, and hesitant glances. The first steps toward peace were neither simple nor quick, but Lucas knew there was no turning back. He had seen the path laid out before him, and though the weight of his responsibility was immense, it was something he could not ignore. The human fleet that had arrived on Kaluna's world was not the only one. As word of Lucas's miraculous survival spread, more ships began to arrive, bearing representatives from various factions of humanity. There were soldiers, commanders, politicians, and even civilians who had been caught in the crossfire of the war. They came to meet Lucas, to understand what had changed him, what had turned him from a soldier into a voice for peace. At first, the conversations were cautious, full of suspicion. Some saw him as a traitor, someone who had abandoned his comrades in the fight for humanity's survival. Others were more curious, willing to listen to what he had to say. But all of them shared one thing in common: they were tired. Tired of the war, of the loss, and of the endless cycle of destruction. They had seen what it had cost them, but they didn't know how to stop it. Lucas stood before them in the main command hall, flanked by Kaluna. Her presence was both reassuring and intimidating, but it was clear to everyone that she was not here to threaten them. She was here as a symbol, a living testament to a different way of being, one that was grounded in care and understanding rather than fear and conquest. Listen to me, Lucas said, his voice resonating through the hall. I know what it feels like to fight, to lose, and to wonder if there's anything left worth saving. But I've seen another way. I've lived another way. A way where we don't have to destroy to survive. He looked directly at the assembled humans, their faces weary but full of curiosity. I've been shown the path, but it's not one I can walk alone. It's a path we all have to take, together. We've spent too long divided by borders and ideologies, too long seeing each other as enemies. But we are not enemies. We are all the same, all fighting for survival in a universe that doesn't care if we succeed or fail. What we do next is up to us. Lucas's words hung in the air like a challenge, but also an invitation. The room was silent as the leaders and soldiers absorbed his message. Finally, one of the senior officers stepped forward. His face was hardened, his uniform stained with the scars of battle. But there was a flicker of something else in his eyes: doubt. Yes, but also a glimmer of hope. What do you propose, Sergeant Grant? He asked, his voice heavy with the weight of years of conflict. How do we convince those still fighting out there to lay down their weapons? How do we get them to trust this alien? Lucas glanced at Kaluna, who had been silently observing the exchange. She nodded, her massive form exuding the calm assurance that had come to define her presence. He knew the answer, but it was not something that could be said in a single speech or promise. It had to be shown, through action, through small steps that led to something greater. We start by reaching out to those who are still out there, those who haven't yet seen the truth, Lucas said. We show them that peace is possible, but we don't do it by demanding they stop fighting. We do it by offering them something better, a future where we don't have to destroy each other just to survive. Kaluna stepped forward, her immense form casting a shadow over the room. I am not your enemy, she said in her deep, resonant voice, her words translated through a device Lucas had come to rely on. We are not here to conquer or to dominate. We are here to help. We offer knowledge, healing, and the chance for unity. But it is up to you to decide if you are ready to accept it. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that silenced the room. The soldiers, the commanders, and even the politicians stood still, as if waiting for something to happen. And in a sense, it did. In that moment, A seed was planted, the first step toward healing a fractured world. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was a beginning. Over the next few months, Lucas and Kaluna worked together to bridge the gap between humanity and the alien species. Through diplomacy, education, and demonstrations of the peaceful methods Kaluna's people had used for centuries, the message began to spread. Humanity's leaders, once locked in conflict, began to set aside their differences, at least temporarily, to work toward rebuilding their world and their relationships with the other species they had encountered. For Lucas, it was a constant struggle. He still woke up in the middle of the night, haunted by the screams of those lost on the battlefield. He still questioned whether the road he had chosen was the right one. But every time doubt crept into his mind, he looked to Kaluna, who stood by him like a mother, guiding him with her silent strength. And he reminded himself that peace was not the absence of conflict, it was the willingness to grow beyond it, to find understanding where there was once fear. One evening, as the sun set behind the alien mountains, Lucas found himself standing at the edge of the lake once more, his thoughts heavy with the weight of his responsibilities. Kaluna stood beside him, her gaze cast toward the horizon. "You've done well, Lucas Grant," she said, her voice gentle, but full of pride. "You've shown them the way." Lucas nodded, but the weight of the world still pressed on his shoulders. "I couldn't have done it without you." Kaluna's eyes softened as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you will not have to continue alone. We are all in this together." In that moment, Lucas knew the journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were many challenges ahead. But for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of hope, a hope that humanity could learn, could grow, and could one day find a lasting peace. And no matter how difficult the path ahead, he would walk it with Kaluna by his side, guided by the lessons of care, compassion, and the belief that they could be better, together. As the months turned into years, the world began to change in ways that Lucas had once thought impossible. The seeds of peace that he and Kaluna had planted started to grow. It wasn't a rapid transformation, there were setbacks, moments of doubt, and lingering resistance from factions unwilling to let go of the past. But with each step forward, humanity began to understand that the galaxy was vast, and they no longer needed to wage war to carve out their place within it. Lucas, now a liaison between Earth and the various alien civilizations they had encountered, had become a symbol, not just of survival, but of change, of what it meant to rise from the ashes of war and embrace the unknown with an open heart. His days were filled with meetings, discussions, and sometimes confrontations, but each one brought them closer to the future Kaluna had shown him, a future of cooperation rather than destruction. But it was the unexpected moments that he treasured most. Quiet evenings by the shimmering lake, where he would sit with Kaluna and reflect on the progress they had made. The alien mother, who, in his mind, had transcended her role as a caregiver to become a mentor and friend, would sit beside him, her towering figure casting a protective shadow as she silently offered comfort with her presence. One such evening, as the twin moons rose over the alien world, Lucas found himself once again at the edge of the lake, the faint glow of bioluminescent flowers casting an ethereal light on the water's surface. He had just returned from a tense negotiation with a faction of Earth's military leadership, who were still skeptical of the new path he was advocating. He had managed to hold his ground, but the conversation had left him exhausted, his resolve tested. "Kaluna," he said, turning to her, "how do you stay so calm, so sure of this path? I can't help but feel the weight of it all sometimes." The alien mother regarded him with her soft, glowing eyes. "The weight of what, Lucas Grant?" He gestured toward the vastness of the galaxy, the ships that now regularly visited the planet, the new allies and enemies they were forging relationships with, all of it. "The responsibility, the people I have to convince, the ones who still want to fight, who don't believe in what we're doing. Sometimes, I feel like we're asking too much of everyone." Kaluna remained silent for a long moment, her gaze distant as if she were contemplating something far beyond the horizon. Finally, she spoke, her voice as steady and calm as ever. "You see, Lucas, we are not asking them to abandon everything they know. We are simply offering them a new way, a way they have not yet fully understood. They are like the seed of a great tree, struggling to break through the soil. They do not know the sky yet, nor the sun, But that does not mean they cannot grow. It is not the path of the strong who fight and dominate, but the path of the patient who guide and nurture. Lucas listened intently, the weight of her words slowly sinking in. But what if they don't want to grow? What if they're too afraid to change? Kaluna's eyes met his, filled with a wisdom that spoke of centuries, even millennia, of experience. Change is always difficult. It is the nature of all living things to resist what is unfamiliar. But it is not fear that defines us, it is our willingness to embrace the unknown, to trust that even in darkness, there is the potential for light. Her words, though simple, resonated deeply with him. He had spent so long fighting wars, thinking in terms of victories and defeats. But this mission, this movement toward peace, was different. It was not about winning in the traditional sense. It was about opening hearts, changing minds, and planting the seeds of hope in a galaxy that had seen too much destruction. Just as Lucas was about to respond, a new presence interrupted the quiet moment. A small group of humans and aliens had gathered at the edge of the lake. It was not uncommon for Lucas to meet with various representatives. But tonight was different. They were here for a ceremonial event, an unprecedented gathering to celebrate the first formal treaty of peace between humanity and Kaluna's people. The ceremony would be the first of many, a public acknowledgement that peace was not just a possibility but a reality. Lucas stood, his chest swelling with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "It's starting," he murmured to Kaluna. She nodded, her gaze focused on the assembly. "Yes, it is, but it is not the end, Lucas Grant. It is merely another beginning." As the ceremony commenced, Lucas stood at the front, flanked by Kaluna and other leaders from both human and alien factions. The first step was to sign the peace treaty, but that was just a formality. The real work lay ahead, building relationships, fostering trust, and navigating the complex web of alliances and disagreements that would inevitably arise. But as he looked out at the crowd, Lucas saw something he had not expected: hope. It wasn't just in the eyes of the leaders, but in the eyes of the soldiers, the civilians, and even the children playing at the edge of the gathering. They were all here, standing together, human, alien, and all those in between, because they believed in something better. The peace treaty was signed, and the crowd erupted into applause. But Lucas did not feel like he had won a victory. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted, not from his shoulders, but from the collective burden humanity had carried for so long. Later that evening, after the celebration had ended, Lucas found himself alone with Kaluna once more. The world had changed, and the future was uncertain. But one thing was clear: they were no longer alone in their struggle. They had brought others with them, showing them that there was more to existence than conflict, more to life than destruction. Kaluna stood beside him, her towering form casting a protective shadow over the peaceful world they had helped create. "You've done more than you realize, Lucas Grant," she said, her voice gentle yet full of pride. He looked at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "We've done it together, Kaluna." And as they gazed out at the stars, Lucas knew the journey wasn't over. But for the first time, he felt ready for whatever came next. There was peace ahead, and with it, the possibility of a future where humanity could stand side by side with their new allies, not as conquerors, but as equals. The peace treaty had been signed, but it was not the end of the work. It was only the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. The years following the treaty's enactment were filled with both hope and challenges, as Lucas and Kaluna worked tirelessly alongside leaders from various species to forge stronger alliances, heal old wounds, and ensure the fragile peace held. For Lucas, the weight of responsibility never truly lifted. He often found himself standing in the midst of tense negotiations, where the scars of past conflicts were still fresh, and the voices of those unwilling to let go of old grudges could be heard. Some factions, particularly those who had profited from war, were reluctant to embrace a new way of thinking. Still, the foundation had been laid. It was a matter of time and patience. With Kaluna's guidance, Lucas learned that peace was not just about the cessation of violence. It was about creating understanding where there was once distrust, about teaching the value of empathy and cooperation to those who had forgotten. They traveled together to different planets, some still recovering from their own wars, others eager to join the growing coalition of peaceful civilizations. Kaluna's presence, towering yet gentle, was a constant source of strength. She had seen the worst the universe had to offer, but she had also witnessed its capacity for change. She never wavered in her belief that all species, no matter how different, could find common ground. It was during one of these diplomatic missions that Lucas encountered a particularly hostile faction, a remnant of the warlords who had once waged battle against humanity. Their leader, a sharp-eyed alien with a jagged scar that ran across his face, had been part of the previous conflicts and viewed the growing peace efforts with disdain. "We are warriors, not diplomats," the warlord spat as he stood across from Lucas and Kaluna. "Your kind, humans and aliens alike, have shown weakness. Peace is a lie. We will not bow to you." Lucas stood firm, feeling the weight of the moment. He had learned a lot since the war, but this encounter was a test of everything he had come to believe. "Peace isn't weakness," Lucas said, his voice steady. "It's strength. Strength to look past the past, to build something better. You've fought wars all your life, and where has it gotten you? Warlords and leaders who only seek to keep others under their boot. There's no future in that." The warlord's eyes narrowed. "And what do you propose, human? That we join your utopia?" "No," Kaluna interjected, her deep voice carrying a quiet authority. "What we propose is a choice. You can continue down your path, which will lead only to more destruction. Or you can join us in building something that lasts, a future where you don't have to fight to prove your strength." The warlord remained silent, his gaze flicking between Lucas and Kaluna. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lucas could see the internal conflict in the warlord's eyes, pride, stubbornness, and perhaps a hint of fear. The fear of change. The fear of what it meant to leave behind a lifetime of violence. "What's it going to be?" Lucas asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Will you choose to fight, or will you choose to build?" For a long moment, the warlord said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned away, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his decision. "I don't know," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, "but I'll think on it." That was all Lucas needed to hear. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. It wasn't about winning with force. It was about planting a seed of doubt, offering an alternative. Lucas had seen it too many times before. Change never came quickly or easily, but it was possible. The warlord wasn't ready to embrace peace just yet. But Lucas knew that every conversation like this, every dialogue, could slowly shift the galaxy toward understanding. The years continued to pass, and with them came more successes and failures. Lucas found himself not only serving as a bridge between humanity and other species, but as a mentor to a new generation of diplomats and leaders. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a teacher, helping others understand that the future didn't have to be defined by conflict. He still visited the lakeside world often, where Kaluna had first nursed him back to health, and the peace that had begun there now extended across many worlds. The alien world, once a symbol of war's destruction, had become a thriving example of what cooperation could achieve. The people of Kaluna's species had continued their work of healing, teaching other species how to live in balance with nature, not dominating it, and offering solutions to ecological and societal challenges that had plagued other worlds. One evening, Lucas stood with Kaluna on the shore of the lake once more. The moons reflected off the water, their soft glow casting ripples of light across the surface. He thought back to that first moment when he had awakened in her care, broken and lost, uncertain of what the future held. Now, years later, he had come to understand that peace wasn't something you could force, it was something that had to be nurtured, one step at a time. "Do you ever think about the past?" Lucas asked quietly, his gaze on the shimmering water. Kaluna's voice was calm as ever. "I remember it. The pain, the suffering, the loss. But I also know that it does not define me, nor does it define you. We are not bound by the past, but by what we choose to create." Lucas nodded slowly. "Sometimes I wonder if we've done enough, if we've really changed things." Kaluna's gaze softened, and she placed a large hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "You have done more than you know. You have shown the galaxy that change is possible, that we can choose to walk a different path. That is enough. The rest will follow." As they stood together in the quiet of the night, Lucas felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. There was still work to be done, battles to be fought, not with weapons, but with hearts and minds. But he wasn't alone anymore. He had Kaluna by his side, and the knowledge that peace, like any great force, was something that could not only survive, it could thrive. And for the first time in his life, Lucas truly believed it. The years continued to unfold, and with each passing day, the universe began to feel more like a place of possibility than a battleground. Lucas, now a seasoned ambassador and one of the central figures in the rebuilding efforts, often reflected on how far they had come. What had once been a fractured, war-torn world was becoming a place where peace, albeit fragile, was beginning to take root. The galaxy had changed, he had changed, and in ways he never expected. He was no longer the soldier who had once been only defined by his uniform and the fight. But even in this era of progress, there were those who clung to the past. Resistance, though less frequent, still flared up in pockets of the galaxy. Old enemies, some former allies, others the remnants of defeated factions, sought to destabilize the fragile peace. They had seen how alliances could be forged through understanding, and they feared it. To them, peace wasn't a way forward. It was a surrender. Lucas had witnessed firsthand how deeply ingrained the desire for control and power could be, how it consumed even the most hardened individuals. One such faction had begun to organize in the outer regions of space, a group of warlords who still believed in the superiority of their bloodlines and the old ways of conquest. They had gathered followers who were disillusioned by the growing peace, and their message was simple, that humanity, and by extension, all other species, was growing weak. To them, the galaxy should belong to those who were willing to fight for it. Lucas knew that these remnants of war were dangerous. He and Kaluna had spoken about it often. While peace was the goal, and cooperation the dream, there would always be those who would attempt to drag them back into the old ways. It was a constant balancing act, standing firm for peace while acknowledging that there would always be those who would push back against it. One evening, as he stood at the command center of the newly constructed Peace Hub, a place where diplomats from dozens of species came together to discuss issues of the galaxy, he was approached by a young officer, her face drawn with concern. "Sir, we've intercepted a transmission. A large fleet has been spotted in the outer rim, and it's not responding to our communications. We believe it's the remnants of the warlords." Lucas took a deep breath. His instincts kicked in, but he didn't immediately react with fear. He knew that fear was the enemy of peace. He turned to Kaluna, who stood beside him. Her tall form, ever the symbol of strength and quiet wisdom, was a steady presence. "This could escalate quickly," Lucas said, his voice low. "We need to act carefully. The last thing we want is for this to turn into a full-blown war." Kaluna nodded, her gaze unwavering. "We will show them the path to peace. But if they refuse, we will stand firm. Peace does not come without sacrifice." Lucas Grant. "But we will not fight for dominance, we will fight for what is right." He felt a surge of gratitude for her presence. Kaluna's words had always been a grounding force for him. She reminded him that peace wasn't about avoidance. It was about courage. The courage to face opposition. The courage to walk a path of righteousness even when the darkness loomed large. Lucas turned to the officer. "Prepare a diplomatic mission. I'll go personally." The officer looked surprised. "But sir, if this is a hostile fleet, I'm aware of the risks, but the last thing we need is another war. We'll negotiate first. If they reject our offer of peace, then we'll make other arrangements." With that, Lucas and Kaluna set off with a small team to meet the warlord faction's fleet. As they traveled through the vast stretches of space toward the outer rim, Lucas reflected on how far they had come. He had never imagined himself in a role like this, leading not through force, but through understanding. And yet, he had come to realize that his greatest strength was not in what he could do with a weapon, but in what he could achieve with words, with empathy, and with the unwavering belief that a better future was possible. When they arrived, the warlord fleet was as imposing as he had expected, cruisers and battleships, their weapons still charged and ready, the remnants of a bygone era, showing their teeth like animals backed into a corner. The leader of this faction, a vicious-looking alien with sharp features and a jagged crown on his head, was waiting for them on the bridge of his flagship. "I've heard much about you, Lucas Grant," the warlord leader sneered, his eyes cold. "A human who has decided to turn his back on his own kind, to side with these creatures." He gestured at Kaluna, who stood beside Lucas, her presence immense and intimidating. "What do you want, human? Your peace is a delusion. The galaxy belongs to those who take it." Lucas stood tall, his heart steady. What belongs to the strong is not what you think. True strength lies in unity, in cooperation, in sharing a future rather than fighting over it. I didn't turn my back on my own kind, I turned my back on the past. And so should you. The warlord's laughter echoed through the command center. You speak of peace, but do you have the strength to back it up? Do you have the resolve to defeat us? Because if you cannot, your precious peace will die with you. Kaluna's voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of centuries. The strength we speak of is not in dominance, but in the ability to live in balance, in understanding. You are free to reject this, but know this, you will not be able to erase the peace we have already begun. It is not just yours to destroy. The warlord's expression faltered for a moment, and Lucas saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in the armor of defiance. You don't have to fight, Lucas continued. You've been taught that war is the only way to prove your worth. But it's not. Strength is in the choice to rise above destruction. We're offering you a way to be part of something greater. The choice is yours. The warlord stared at him for a long time. The silence stretched on, each second filled with a tension that seemed to hold the fate of the galaxy in its grasp. Finally, the warlord looked away, his hands clenched into fists. I will not bow to your peace, he growled, but his voice lacked conviction. But I will give you one chance to prove that your way is stronger than mine. If you fail, I will wipe you all from the galaxy. Kaluna nodded. So be it. The warlord's fleet powered down its weapons, and for the first time in a long while, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. There would be no immediate war, but Lucas knew that the battle was far from over. The true struggle was not against weapons or armies, but against fear, pride, and the refusal to change. As the fleet turned toward Earth's peace hub, Lucas felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. Peace was never guaranteed, but with each challenge, each choice to rise above the violence, they were proving that the future was not written in the blood of the past, it was written in the courage to choose something better. And for the first time in a long time, Lucas believed, truly believed, that the galaxy had a future worth fighting for. 1.